All right, welcome. The next talk that we have is a topic which is a bit close to my heart, and that is the topic of web accessibility. And when people think about ads and ad blocking, sometimes people may miss the aspect of how does it work or not work when it comes to people with disabilities. And that's why I'm really excited to have Shilpi Kapoor with us. Shilpi is the CEO of Barrier Break. She's a serial entrepreneur with a passion for technology and disability, looking at ways to deliver accessibility as a priority and at scale. She is recognized as one of the top 15 women transforming India by the Niti Aayog, by the government of India in 2019. When it comes to web accessibility, and especially in India, Barrier Break and Shilpi are the go-to people and the company to really talk to. So I'm really excited to have Shilpi present on her topic. So over to you, Shilpi. Shilpi, you may be muted, so if you can take a look.
Thank you. I was muted. Thanks, Shwetank. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for inviting me here today. I must say I am kind of out of place because generally in the world of ads and ad blockers, I don't think accessibility is a topic of conversation. So I'm going to try and over the next 20 odd minutes, look at how I can get each of you to think about a group of people that are totally largely ignored when it comes to ads. And I will give you a little bit of my perspective of how I look at it. So I think it's a given that each one of you is attending the summit because you believe are passionate about ad blockers, and obviously ads are a big part of the web today. So I think it's safe to say that when the web started, it was supposed to be a web for all. And I think Tim Berners-Lee started off with that mandate saying, can the web really work for each and every one of us, including people with disabilities? And from there, we've progressed over the years, where we obviously see the conversations of our websites accessible, our documents accessible, our videos accessible. But I think one area that we're yet not discussing, and I'm hoping this group here will help us shift that, is are ads accessible for all, right? And I'm really here to talk to you about that. So I'll just give you a little brief background about myself. Shwetank has already given an introduction. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I have 3 organizations, Barrier Break, 24/7 Accessible Documents, and Newshook. And yes, I'm passionate about digital accessibility, but I'll just give you a short snippet of my story to help you put perspective of why I do what I do and why I want you to join me in ensuring that ads as well as ad blockers are accessible. So I'll go back in time to 93 to 95, just out of college. A kid in a chat room got hooked onto security and hacking of servers. Was very fortunate that my passion was channelized by somebody I met in that chat room, who then finally offered me a job. So being out of India, it was a dream job. You'd sit on the internet and you would find hackers and you would keep servers secure. Until 2 years into my job, and one day on my shift, I was there with my boss. And I caught the hacker and he didn't. And I actually asked him, I said, what happened? Because everything I knew about hacking, I'd learned from him. And he was so sweet enough that he turned around and told me, he said, Shilpi, you beat me to the game only because my technology is not doing very well. And I'm waiting for a technical assistant to come in and help solve the problem. And I haven't told you, but all of the while you've known me, I've been paralyzed. I had met with an accident. And I use a sip and puff device to control my computer. And that one was the moment I think my life shifted. And I'm hoping that today's conversation shifts a little bit of perspective for you. So from there started my journey of becoming passionate about making digital spaces accessible. And I think Shwetank was one of the conversations that I'd had a couple of years ago when we had said, can we use ads on some of Barrier Break's websites to generate revenue? And I had said, but ads are not accessible to people with disabilities. And I'm so happy that I'm finally talking to this amazing group of people about this. So from there, come down to today, we talk about technology being accessible to people, but we really don't understand the audience at large, right? So an audience which is largely ignored, as far as I can see, is a billion plus people. That is actually the statistics of people with disabilities globally, but yet very largely forgotten or ignored. What's also interesting is that this audience has about an $8 trillion disposable income in their hands and in the hands of their families. Now, that is a sizable amount of money that needs to be spent. And obviously, we do know that that's what ads do. They help you spend more money and they help you go out and buy things that sometimes you need, sometimes you might not, but the ad might be so enticing that you would want to go out and buy it. And then at times we do know that we might want to block ads and not see all of the ads. And even that opportunity should be available to people with disabilities to decide what they want to access and what they don't want to access. Right? So what's interesting is that as an entire industry, most of us seem to be ignoring this audience, right? And the aim for us is to really understand who this audience comprises of. This audience comprises of people with diverse needs. Right? They might have a challenge visually, either with their hearing, mobility, or might even have learning disabilities. And interestingly, you and I might be a part of this audience as we start aging. I know for one, I, in the last, through the pandemic, have had to start wearing specs to use my computer. And I can so understand the challenges of low vision suddenly so much more closely. So I think it's really critical that we understand this audience and the ways that they use technology, right? I'm sure a lot of you are using a lot of the assistive technology that people with disabilities use. But just to give a simple example, if any of you are using the voice feature of Google Maps, then you are using something that could be used by a blind person. If you were using word prediction on your computers or on your handsets, then you are using a tool that was created for people with learning disabilities. But all of these fall under a bracket of assistive technology. And people with disabilities would use different kinds of technology, whether it's a screen reader, a magnifier, speech recognition, to access the web and thus to access ads as well as ad blockers. Right? So this is just a snapshot of our audience. A billion plus people, $8 trillion, a diverse audience, which will also include us, if not today, sometime shortly, and some cool technology, which I might call assistive, but is actually becoming very mainstream today. So let's go from there to the conversation about one of my businesses. The business is called Newshook. It is a media website. Feel free to go and look at it as news at newshook.com. That's news with a Z. So when we started Newshook, it was about changing attitudes towards people with disabilities, right? And what did we want to do? We wanted to share stories about people with disabilities and talk about them and bring out all the amazing work that's happening in this space, the challenges that disabled face, as well as some of the great stories of how they overcome their challenges and how they have fun, enjoy movies, and in general just get access to news. And when we started Newshook as a media site, one of the most, one of the ways that we find media sites generating revenue is to have ads on them. And then obviously some of our customers might want to use ad blockers. When we started doing a research of all the different ad networks out there and looked at how accessible they were, we actually reached a point where we had to decide that did we want to shift from our mandate of ensuring everything on Newshook was accessible to looking for revenue on a solution that was actually inaccessible to disabled people. So we had to make a call, which is revenue was not going to be that important to us, but telling the stories was going to be important, right? And till date, it's now been 4 years, I think. We yet haven't been able to start ads on our website because none of the ad networks are yet fully accessible. So let's talk a little about that. I'm going to talk on both the sides, ads as well as ad blockers, to help put into perspective. So here we've got, people with disabilities experiencing different types of ads, right? So all of us know that we have different kinds of ads today. We might have a text ad, we might have just images, we might have a video ad. And now what are the challenges people face, right? Firstly, when I come onto an ad, if it's a text ad, it would yet read out for a screen reader user, right? But very often they would hear a lot of garbage in the background because most of these ads don't follow the principles of accessibility, right? So how do we ensure that that happens? Now, if you see one of the ads out here and multiple products by IKEA, and all of these products are just images. But now, how does a blind person actually interact with this ad? Because they won't really know which are these images that are being talked about. And so now we have somebody who's spending ad money, marketing budgets, but is actually this ad is of no value to this user. And that's a billion people around the world, right? The third kind of ad is we might have a video ad, right? Now just imagine for a minute, there's this video playing, there's text on the screen, there's background sound, and a blind person can't even see that information. On the flip side, you might have a video which has auditory support, right? And there's somebody speaking or talking about the offer. And I might have a deaf person on the side, and they wouldn't even know what is being said because there are no captions in that ad. Right? So just think for a minute. You and I are going out and spending our marketing budgets to people who probably cannot even use these ads, but we're yet spending that money on them. So how do we shift that, right? So how do we ensure ads itself, firstly, are accessible? Because that's how we would get, sales and new customers and outreach on the first side. And then on the second side, what about the ad blocker experience? Shouldn't a person have the right to choose whether they'd like to see ads or not? Um, I think you all know the space better than I do. Right? But we might have different kinds of ad blockers out there. From a technology perspective, there might be some browser extensions. There might be standalone products that might exist. So what's really important is that are these solutions also accessible to people with disabilities? Right? Can I actually use these solutions with just using a keyboard and not using my mouse? Can I actually interact with the settings feature and set up whatever it is that I want as the options for the ad blocker? Generally, I would say most of these solutions are inaccessible to people with disabilities, right? Um, and the reason is because all of us fabulous developers out there, right, are not considering this audience or the necessary accessibility standards and guidelines that exist to make technology accessible. So yes, it's good enough to say, is Microsoft Word accessible, or is an e-commerce portal accessible? But it's as important to say that every tool out there that is being created by you and me as developers needs also to be accessible to people with disabilities. Right? So can we shift the mindset from just putting out some great technology, but to a mindset which says every technology that we create needs to be accessible, because you and I both know that there is a need for ad blockers. There is a use case for them, and that use case also exists for people with disabilities. And at times, I think it might, be a lot more needed for people with disabilities. So imagine if you were somebody who had, a learning disability and got distracted by ads and wanted to block out the ads at that point. Right? Having that option available would be so amazing. So, how do we ensure that all of the products out there, on the one side ads, on the other side the ad blockers, are fully accessible? So, a really small peek into my world. What can you do, or what can we do collectively? Each of us can start thinking about accessibility when we build our solutions, right? Whether it's an extension, whether it's a standalone product, whether it is something using AI in the future, which says which ads do you see and which ones do you block. All of that needs to think of accessibility also. So, firstly, build for accessibility, right? Don't ignore this audience, right? Start looking at a W3C standard called Web Content Accessibility Guideline. Go out, and it's really simple. For all of you geeky people out there, you are so cool at the way you develop, new ideas, new solutions. It will be very easy for you to implement. I won't even probably need to come and help you do it. It's so intuitive. It is about code at the back end, right? And it's about doing your code right and coding correctly, accurately, using the right kind of semantic, and ethically by including people with disabilities. So just start from there. Just go look up Web Content Accessibility Guideline and just jump right in and look at how your solutions can be accessible. The next is obviously test for accessibility. I'm sure a lot of you must be wondering, she's saying accessibility, but she's got A11Y on her screen. So A11Y is the Numerian, oh, I can never pronounce it right, for accessibility. That's A11 characters and Y. So test for accessibility. So test to ensure that users with disabilities have an equitable experience, right? I'm sure you want a larger user base. I'm sure you want more customers. Here is a customer base of 1 million people that you are ignoring, right? 1 billion. So imagine if you can start to bring them in and have that many more downloads of your extensions and that many more customers, right? Today, a customer base that totally doesn't understand ad blockers, right? Probably doesn't even necessarily use them. And then lastly, it's about building awareness. It's about communicating that your product is accessible, your solution is accessible, and that customers can come and use your products. And that you as an organization build for all. You just don't build for a certain set of people, but you really do truly build for everybody, right? So this is just me saying, you know, just go to W3C, go and look for the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, and think about different kinds of users. Believe me, like me, in the last 4 months, I realized that specs are such an integral part of my technology journey today, and I can't see very much without them. That more and more accessibility is something that you and I are going to need into the future, right? So why wait? And why wait for somebody to write in and say, your product doesn't work for me, but why not be the first to go out and say, yes, our solutions work for all and we build for everybody. So with that, it's Think Accessibility. Feel free to drop me a line. I am active on Twitter, would love to talk to you and would love to hear about how we can get the ad blocker industry and solutions to start thinking about accessibility. Um, Perfect.
Great. That was so nice to hear, Shilpi. And once again, nice to see you. Me and Shilpi go back quite a long while, and I for a while also worked at Barrier Break. with Shilpi. So that was a great experience as well. And it was also quite nice to see Newshook doing so well. I I had a question regarding the entire topic, which is what should ad providers do to make sure that their ads are accessible, and also do you think that the testing for this accessibility can be totally automated, or does it require a certain level of human interpretation as well?
Sure. So firstly, simple things. You have an ad which has images. Can we allow people when they create their ad to also give an image description for every one of those images so that that could be read out to a visually impaired person? A simple thing is that, right? If you're creating a video ad, to go out and say, please ensure that you have captions if you've got audio in this ad, right? And it would be great if the Googles and the Bings would start enforcing that from their side, because they are looking at investing in accessibility and are heavily investing in accessibility. But I think ads is something that is yet not reached, people's thought process. But interestingly, ads is where the money is, right? And ads is where the revenue gets generated from, and ads is where the customers benefit. So why shouldn't people with disabilities get that amazing cool offer of 20% off? And why should only you and I get that offer, right? So I think it's about that. And to your question about how do you test, I the UK government came out with an amazing study where they said that less than 40% of errors can be found by automated tools. So go to the people. People with disabilities are your best critique, right? They will tell you what's working for them, what's not working for them. So go to them, right? So at Barrier Break, we have a team of 200 of us who work in accessibility. 70% of our team comprises of people with disabilities, right? So go to organizations who know disabled people, right? And bring them into your purview and just start from there.
Yeah, I agree. Like in the end, if you have to do it right, then just relying on automation may not be the best course of action. You would need people who are actually having disabilities to also test and give their final verdict. My next question was about which type of ads should definitely be blocked by ad blockers from an accessibility perspective. You mentioned things like like people with learning disabilities, for example, being distracted by certain types of ads. There could also be things like auto-playing ads or stuff like this. So do you have any opinions on which type of ads should definitely be blocked by certain by people, especially for certain types of disabilities?
So my opinion is give people the choice, and which is why ad blockers having options and settings which are accessible, where people can choose what they want and what they don't want, would be the ideal situation, Shwetank, because I wouldn't want to make a choice for anybody. But just to give an example, right? Let's say you have a lot of Flickr. Right now, the Web Content Accessibility Guideline says that if there is a certain rate of flicker, there is a chance that somebody might have an epileptic fit. Right now, that is something that. But now, if you give that option to a person, that if we see something like this, then disable it, would work. But similarly, if you had an option which said, I am a deaf person, I do not want to see video ads which are not captioned, right? Take those off, right? Now you were going to save it on two sides. One, you want to help that person to be able to get the kind of ads that they want and block the kinds of ads that they don't. You're going to save the end user money because they're not just showing ads to an audience that cannot digest their ads and can't experience them at all. And so I'm not wasting my marketing dollar on that, which might actually be an incentive for people to use ad blockers because it's got a use case there in a very weird way, right? So I think accessibility options with giving people the choice of what they like, what they don't like, what kind of ads they don't want to see, would be a really cool feature as time goes by. And that's personalization. And I think personalization is the future for all of us.
Yeah, Yeah, giving users the choice. I think that would be really, really great. There's one question from the audience. I suppose that it's sort of like is it really the case that there's no ad blockers out there that have accessibility features? And I suppose, Shilpi, you did a little bit of research over there, and yeah, it would be nice to get your views.
Accessibility feature? No, none of them. Are they usable by some mechanism because the developer didn't realize they were doing something to make it accessible? Probably yes. And yes is the answer to that, right? So you can use those solutions. But if you think there was an intention to make a solution accessible at the start, I think that is missing, right? And thus, the feature logic of it is missing. But I must say this for the ad blocker world, the ads also need to wake up to that, and the ad blocker world. So I think we need the ecosystem to kind of come together. And we need the disabled to go out and say, we also want ads. We want the same amazing offers that you are getting. Why shouldn't we have that? That's the third piece.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I think both as both ad blockers as well as people who are making the creators for ads, there's after this talk, I think there should be a moment of introspection, and taking a look at how do we make sure that things are fair for such a large audience, which right now is not the case. One final question. Are you aware of any academic research going on, or any kind of other research which is going on in terms of like accessibility and ad blocking? Maybe the WCAG Silver Task Force or anything like this?
Actually, I haven't. I went out and did research before this, and I just wanted to find somebody who is talking about this. So we do have, in the ad world now, you have people saying, how do you portray people with disabilities, right? And how do you talk about them? And that is yet a conversation. But when it comes to ads, and the same thing ads applies to ads, but you don't have people talking about the accessibility of ads. So for that, I think, Shwetanka, I have to thank you for telling me about the summit, and it's kind of enticing me to submit a paper. So thank you.
Yeah, and it was a pleasure having you talk over here as well. Thanks, Shilpi. And that's it for this talk. In 3 minutes, we'll start our next session with Peter Lowe. See you then.
Thank you.